Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, I believe under our original agreement, I'm recognized next.
Yes,
right?
sir.
And I appreciate what the Democratic leader has said. And I was willing to step aside earlier when I had the floor because I understood the two leaders were coming to speak, and as a matter of courtesy to them, and I know the Democratic leader at least appreciated that. So let me agree with what he said. You know, I came here, and the President of the United States, who was an unelected president, been an unelected vice president, there's Jerry Ford, and then under our change in our law since President Kennedy's death, was able to pick a unelected vice president. I remember Democrats and Republicans alike welcoming him and saying, let's go forward. And I've been here with each president, some re-elected, some not. And in every instance, I see the outgoing president welcoming the incoming president, Republican or Democratic. And they've done it to try to make a smooth transition, not for their own political purposes, but for the good of the United States of America. Everyone has done that. I think of George H.W. Bush welcoming Bill Clinton, who had defeated him. I remember Al Gore, who had more votes than George W. Bush, but after the court had ruled, graciously conceded to George W. Bush. I remember Hillary Clinton with well over 2 million more votes than Donald Trump, but saying, here's what the Electoral College is, and conceding. Now we see Joseph Biden with more votes than anybody has ever gotten in the history of the United States for president. And the incumbent president, as he goes off golfing again and again, pretends that he doesn't have to step back. And in fact, actually does everything possible to make it difficult for the new president to handle the transition. That's wrong. Just as I've encouraged both Democrats and Republicans as president, you help the incoming president with transition, not for your political reasons or their political reasons, but for the good of all of us as Americans. And to say, oh no, we're going to hold the key to the door of the transition office. Every Republican, every Democrat voted for the money for that transition office, so that whoever is president could step forward and not hurt the country by coming in without doing the necessary preparation. And they're like a little child in a playground. No, we got the key, we're not going to let you have the key. Oh, come on. Do you know how this makes us look to the rest of the world? You know how it makes us look in my state of Vermont, where some Republicans voted for Donald Trump, some voted for Joe Biden. The majority voted in this case for Joe Biden. But I've been hearing from Vermonters all over both parties, what's going on? It's over. It's gone for the country. In that regard, let me just speak briefly about the president-elect and the vice president-elect. When I came to this body, I was the most junior member of the United States Senate and the second youngest. The youngest was a senator from Delaware who had been elected just 2 years before, Joe Biden. And I think the fact that we were the two youngest, we bonded over that. And got to know his family. I knew the tragedy he had when his first wife was killed, his daughter was killed, but he'd go home every day to make sure that he could put his sons to bed, be there with them. I don't know how many times, Mr. President, we'd be standing down there in the well. He's looking at his watch. He said, "What time do you think the last vote's going to be? Because the next train to Delaware is at such a time." And he's like a marathon runner going out the door to make sure he got the train, which he did, to be home to take care of his children. And I remember how happy Marcel and I were when he met Jill. What a wonderful woman. Dr. Biden was everything you'd want in a first lady in this country. We had the privilege of traveling with both of them, seeing the love and the joy they had in each other's company, the love and the joy they've shown in their children and grandchildren, and continue to. I watched Joe Biden with a sense of dignity as he ran for election to the presidency, an office he had hoped to hold, but probably thought he never would. I know that he had wanted to run 4 years ago, but it's too close to the time of losing his son, Bo. And I'd had the privilege of knowing Bo. In fact, the last time I talked to him was on the battlefields in Iraq, where he was serving in combat for our U.S. military. I told him at that time, you know, when I get back on the plane, I'm going to call your father. I always do this if I meet a Vermonter in a war zone. I call their family and say they're doing well. And I'll call your dad and tell him. And I got on the plane, connected to the White House operator, and I remember then Vice President Biden coming on, laughing away. He said, "I know what you're going to say. I got an email from Bo." And I remember when Marcel and I stood there, tears coming down our face as we listened to President Obama and others eulogize Bo at his funeral. And we all felt as part of that family. And so the joy in the Leahy household when he was elected, not just the joy for the good of the country, but the joy of seeing a person who we know, love, and respect elected as president. And add to that the added advantage of Kamala Harris, one of our Senate colleagues here. I remember when Senator Harris came to the Senate, and I was so happy that she was going on Judiciary Committee because she'd been such a good prosecutor, such a good attorney general. She was a woman who didn't need to have much of an orientation. She knew exactly what she was doing. We've gotten to know her and her husband and admire her so, and then when she spoke as they accepted the fact they were president and vice president-elect, when she spoke and said how proud she was to be there with President-elect Biden, but how proud she was to speak to her background, immigrant parents, coming here, the different races shown in her background, and what she's saying to, as she said, women everywhere, but I would say also what she shows to young women, those not old enough to vote, like my granddaughters. And they can look at that and say, that shows everything is open. You know, I come from a state where it's unusual to be elected the first time because, well, I'm the only Democrat ever elected to the U.S. Senate in Vermont's history, sort of the youngest also. I wasn't supposed to win. We were overwhelmingly Republican state than we've become now one of both parties. Our last election, for example, our Republican governor this year, in the last few days, our Republican governor won overwhelmingly. And Molly Gray, a young woman that started out as an intern in my office when at the University of Vermont, she won comfortably, by a comfortable margin, as a Democrat. But also our Republican governor said on election day, for the good of the country, to stop the dissension, to lower the kind of rhetoric we were hearing, he was going to vote for Joseph Biden. Now, I mention that just as a microcosm in our state. But to go back to just a purely personal thing, Marcel and I prayed for that day. We were so happy to see our friends. We were so happy to know they were there. And as one who's known Joe Biden from the day I came into the Senate, and I still remember to this day him coming over to greet me on the floor and saying, "Glad to see us young people here." I was about a year or so older than he. And we were sitting in kind of the junior row. And that friendship has lasted ever since. I know Joe Biden. I know Jill Biden. I know the United States of America. And at a time when we are so torn apart, these are two people who can bring us back together. And I know Kamala Harris. We know her wonderful husband. And here, my goodness, what a broad spectrum right there. In one way unique, in another way not the least bit unique. It's the face of America. It's the face of America, the diversity in our country of race, religion, everything. It's reflected in this ticket. You couldn't be better for the beginning of this century to have such a wide spectrum shown in the President and Vice President of the United States. And I think of what the mayor of Paris said. She issued a statement to the effect of, "Welcome back, America." Well, this is an America that represents all of us. And we should all get together to try to make them successful. If senators disagree on a particular issue, vote up or down. But have the courage to vote. Have the courage to vote. Don't do what we've done this past year, refusing to vote on COVID as thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people die in our country. Have the courage to get up and vote. Vote yes or no. We're here with 6-year terms. We ought to at least have the courage to vote yes or no. And then let's take a pause and say, these are the two who will be the face of America from noon on January 20th. From a personal point of view, that face reflects very much our family, our children, our grandchildren. I can see them in these 4 people, and I'm proud of that. I will admit that I've gotten a few emails from my Irish friends saying how much they're looking forward to a President Biden coming to Ireland. And they've forgiven me my Italian half with that. But I know that when I hear Joe Biden quoting Seamus Heaney, during his campaign by memory. He knows those Irish roots. But he, like his family, are first and foremost Americans. Like his late and wonderful son, Beau, first and foremost Americans. And Kamala Harris speaks of her family, her relatives, her ancestors coming here, her mother and father coming here, coming not to be anything other than Americans. And they are Americans as she is. She is as American as any of us. And so I will simply close with this, Mr. President. Isn't it a time when the United States of America, a country that's become as diverse as you can imagine, can show their face to the rest of the world and say, this is who we are. And then my grandchildren, my white grandchildren, my black grandchildren, can look and say, yes, that's who we are. Joe and Kamala, in a few days I'll call you Mr. President and Madam Vice President. I'll do it with great pride. But I say today to my dear friends, Joe and Kamala, congratulations. This Vermonter is very, very happy. I yield the floor and suggest you have the quorum.